frequent discussion point some people have trouble grappling with is commodity production, specifically commodity production within former socialist experiments. Some people use this as a learned catchphrase in order to dismiss former socialisms entirely, while others simply have no understanding of the what and why of commodity production within, say, for example, the Soviet Union. Hopefully, this video will clear this point up. So, what is commodity production? In essence, any product of labor made for exchange is a commodity. As Lenin put it, a commodity is, in the first place, a thing that satisfies a human want. In the second place, it is a thing that can be exchanged for another thing. This is in line with Marx's chapter on commodities in Capital Volume 1. In that case, then, what is commodity production? Commodity production is production for exchange on the market. As you can imagine, commodity production came into existence with the emergence of a certain set of material conditions, and with changing material conditions, commodity production changed too. Initially, within primitive society, there was little to no commodity production. With innovation and the development of the productive forces of primitive man, the conditions for simple commodity production took form. The product of individual labor, with simple trade of occasional small surplus of, for example, farm produce, is the starting point of said simple commodity production. As this was a result of mostly individual labor, the amount of labor time and other conditions varied between producers, but the market price remained the same. Whether it took you, a wheat farmer in Mesopotamia, 2 weeks or 1 week to cut and bring to market a single bushel of wheat does not matter, as both bushels, assuming they are of similar quality, would have been set for the same price on the market. Continuing this thread into feudalism, the differing conditions and labor time going into the production of commodities would result in, over a long period of time, polarization, where, on one hand, a smaller number of people accumulate commodities, money, etc., which can be turned into capital, and on the other hand, a large group of people would end up being outcompeted on the market, forcing them into bankruptcy and the sale of their labor power as a last resort. This rudimentary overview leads into capitalist commodity production. Within capitalist commodity production, those that have accumulated capital, meaning capitalists, maintain private ownership of the means of production. With capitalists firmly holding employment within their hands, workers have to sell their labor power to capitalists in return for a wage. From the sale of labor power by the worker to the capitalist, work is done and there occurs capitalist exploitation resulting in the extraction of surplus value. Essentially, labor power itself becomes a commodity. This is, in simple terms, wage labor. This did not exist under feudalism or slave society, and with controversy existed in some form in pre-capitalist formations in the Greater West Asia and North Africa region, as well as East Asia, which is a topic for another video. Since we have established that commodity production existed in various forms during different socioeconomic conditions, essentially meaning under different material conditions, would commodity production continue, albeit under a different form, under socialism? This is where lived experience of socialism enters, challenging certain theoretical conceptions prior to socialist experiments existing, and adding a healthy coat of controversy, and boy do we love controversy. Historically, within socialist societies, commodity production of a different kind did exist, primarily due to certain limiting factors. Foremost amongst these reasons is simply circumstance, and the development and success of certain revolutionary movements over others. Modifying Lenin, revolution occurs at the weakest links of capitalism, contrary to Marx's assumptions. History has proven Lenin right, and as a result, revolution swept through not highly industrialized imperial core countries, but agrarian and semi-feudal nations first. Russia, China, Vietnam, Cuba, etc. This resulted in differing contradictions than those assumed within highly industrialized imperial core countries. Russia, for example, had a majority peasant population, and the industrial proletariat was but a slim minority. Immediately, the political course of the USSR was clear, as illustrated by Lenin's work The Tax in Kind. Establish the peasantry, particularly poor and middle peasants, as an ally class to the proletariat, and maintain harmony between the workers and peasants until sufficient proletarianization can occur within the peasantry, through the development of productive forces so that they transition from a private plot peasant production to collective farm production, and then finally to an industrial proletariat within agriculture. This entails a transition from collective farms, a kolkhoz in Russian, to state farms, a sovkhoz, something the USSR was actively doing. Side note, why can't you just proletarianize the peasantry into workers with industrial agricultural farms? Well, this leads into the issues of pragmatism. Peasants in agrarian or semi-feudal societies are intensely attached to their small plots of land, so expropriating and absorbing them into larger industrial farms would effectively kill your connection with the peasantry. Add on top of that the usual instability present during early revolutionary periods, and you'd end up with a course of action not only inadvisable, but also near impossible. How does socialism leap over this hurdle? Thanks to learning the errors and successes of former socialist experiments, we now realize that the slow transition from private plots to collective farms and finally industrial state farms is the correct course if we want to maintain harmony with the peasant class as well as maintain general stability in the countryside. Back on track though. This talk of collective and state ownership generally underpins the differing forms of ownership under socialism. What are those forms, you ask? Well, simple. You have firstly ownership by the whole people and collective ownership. As these two forms of ownership exist, it is not feasible to have unpaid allocation of products between the two, a necessary component of abolishing commodity production. For example, within the USSR, the collective farms would produce agricultural goods with the intention of sale on a limited market between the collective farms and the state. Further derived from this, most trade between the state and the collective farms took the form of commodities. This is commodity exchange, meaning commodity production. Side point. Some people also argue that since certain goods, for example consumer goods distributed by the state in shops, are exchanged through money, this too is a component of commodity production. I tend to disagree with this point as money functions, and historically functioned, differently under socialism, but this is a discussion for another time. Anyhow, just because the two forms, collective ownership and ownership by the whole people, existed does not make it capitalist commodity production. Socialist commodity production differed, primarily in that the economic exploitation of workers through the extraction of surplus value did not exist, and nor did market functions determine production, with commodity exchange being a limited and reluctantly accepted necessity of the circumstances. Furthermore, there was no market for labor power to be exchanged as a commodity, as employment was guaranteed by the state, and during the best times, managers did not have the right to hire and fire, and at the worst, had incredibly limited power in this regard. Nevertheless, even socialist commodity production reproduced bourgeois right, and as a result gave impetus to the socialist necessity that is abolishing commodity production. So, does that mean that we want to rid ourselves of commodity production? Of course, you will not find a single Marxist that wants the perpetual continuation of commodity production. However, an understanding of the facts and material conditions is necessary. Commodity production is not a button we press to turn on or off. Its elimination, like the construction of socialism, is a process that is gradual and will take place through numerous steps and many years. This entails eliminating the material conditions that give rise to commodity production, which entails, for example within socialist nations of agrarian or semi-feudal origin, the gradual transition away from collective farm production, amongst other things. Political considerations, the relationship between the peasantry and the proletariat, national stability, and many other things need to be taken into account. With that also in mind, we have to also realize that the existence of numerous modes of production can be present at one time or different times within a single nation, as Lenin illustrated in the aforementioned essay. Essentially making reductionist claims of not socialism because commodity production null. As you may imagine, things are always more complicated. Finally, a frequently neglected point in the commodity production discussion is this. Historically, global socialist revolution has not occurred. What has occurred is a single locus of revolution from which support and inspiration causes several revolutions to erupt nearby with limited levels of success. As a result, many socialist nations had to develop essentially on their own. As no nation on earth is fully self-sufficient in all its needs, this means that they needed to engage in some level of international trade. This engagement served two functions. Firstly, to buy foreign products of various kinds that are not available or cannot be produced within said socialist nation, and secondly, to sell products on the global market in order to acquire hard currency used for the first function mentioned. This would logically require said socialist nations to engage in some level of commodity production in order to produce goods that can be sold on the global market. This presents us with a political dilemma. Either we establish world revolution in order to circumvent the basic requirement of global trade for unpaid allocation of resources between nations, and hence aiding the full abolishment of commodity production, or we take Menshevik positions of believing that revolution, if not global, and especially in agrarian or semi-feudal nations, is inadvisable if not impossible. The first option is ideal, but unrealistic. The second is just plain silly. Marxists reject both options and choose the only path that has been historically possible. Conquer state power in as many places as possible, begin the construction of socialism, and support global movements, wherever they are, towards their aims of building a new and just society, not based on the exploitation of man, but on mutual cooperation and development. A drier video than usual, I apologize for that. If you're interested in some quick reading to further discuss all of this, give Stalin's Economic Problems of the USSR a read, along with Lenin's Attacks in Kind, and Chapter 5 of a book titled China's Socialist Economy by Shui Mukia. I'll write the name on the screen. Also, give my Was the USSR Socialist video a watch for a deeper dive over there. That'll be all for this time. I'd like to thank my patrons, so thank you to Anarcho-Marxist, Richard Scott Wigton, Lee Gloucester, JC Diaz 547, Faisal Hussain, Samiran Sarkar, Anix Magnus, Ryan Hodgson, Patrick Mansouri, Felipe Corrales, Deep Teeth, Jenny Enox, Bibla Iridion Fan, Comrade R, Alexander Shendi, Wild Bill, Brandon Vergara, John Edward Carrion, A Comrade, At Southern Marxist, Close Sniper, Colin Moran, Because Butts, Bookbinder, Alex Benishek, Comrade Goat, D. Lang, Darius A. Birdall, James Kavanaugh, John Bernston, John Poland, Noel, Nobody, Paul Luders, Pauline McDeesey, Rocco, Rose Hogginson, Scott Radburn, Alan Plum, Andy Haywood, Brandon Persuade, Coach Cinnamon Tea, Comrade Benito, Comrade Pingu, Dale McFarlane, El Wanton, Eli Garzon, Eugene Simonovsky, Farah Tahan, Garlic Bread, Grammar Antifa, Granola Joe, Industrial Robot, Wes, Soviet Puma, Kong Zhao Hu, DV Gold Gamer, Jaden, Philostakis, Job, Eddie Luck, Spooky Scary Socialist, Jordan Follows, Khan, Kyle Rapp, Liam Sipanen, Libertarian Stalinist, Manda, Mass Strike Now, Matt, Mika Garopoulos, Michael Reddy Webster, Namratha Prabhu, Natalie Taylor, Omar Abdul-Jabbar, Parker Cushing, Renkel Blancaster, Ring, Rudy, Sid Singh, Sussy M, Ted Teddington Tedsville, Toki Mukai, Tristan Druyan, Veral Dor, Zatarani, and of course Zarin Arsene. See you next time.